talk about the biggest games in college football, and we have four huge games coming up next week. Of course, the college football playoff, and we're going to preview the quarterfinal round of the playoff. Round one, for the most part, was pretty uneventful. I think it's been talked about to death over the mediascape, but Bobby and I are excited for hopefully better games this week. I mean, not sorry, better games this time around is what I meant.
Well, within a week, yeah, we'll be talking about and watching, what I think will be a great quarterfinal round. If you asked me, years ago before they expanded the playoff, what the perfect number would be, I would have told you eight. So now that we're at eight, I think we'll see a lot better football, a lot more competitive football, and I'm excited to see talk about these matchups.
Well, I think the funny thing is like so many people were complaining about the games being bad, but I don't. I think it's like the larger point that it was well taken was that like there's been a lot of like blowouts, and like in the forward team iteration of this, you know, whether it was a championship or semifinal, whatever, like even in cases where we picked the quote unquote four best teams or most deserving or whatever the case may be, like we the blowouts were are kind of unavoidable. I don't know how you really fix that. It might just be a thing that always happens. We're probably never going to have playoffs with all of the games being close. It doesn't really happen in the NFL. You know, like there's blowouts in the playoffs all the time. Um, I do think it's interesting how much going on the road seemed to affect some teams. I thought that was interesting. But yeah, I think I love the 12 team format. Um, I love how now it feels like a lot more conferences have a chance to put somebody in the playoff with there being 12 teams. Some people were saying that, this could expand to 14 or 16. I wouldn't be in favor of that personally. I think 12 is a great number. But yeah, I think, this it's the first year. We'll see how it goes. I think there's some adjustments that they probably can make, you know, in terms of seating and some other stuff. But I love this, and I'm excited to see see what happens this week and next week, and of course. So
Mhm. Yeah,
anyway,
and yeah,
yeah, no,
not
go ahead.
and we don't need to go ad nauseum on it, like you said, been talked to death. But I think the right teams got in, and even though they got blown out, they earned the butt kicking. So you got to give them credit for that. And you know, like you said, the NFL has blowouts all the time, but the only
Yeah,
difference here is there's a human element, and you always have a that's just an easy scapegoat for you know the competition being bad, good, whatever. But there's just not that in the NFL, NBA, anything like that. So yeah, I don't
yeah,
know.
yeah, 100%. All right, kicking things off with the first round, or sorry, the first game in the second round of the college football playoff. It's the Fiesta Bowl. Penn State and Boise State. The Nittany Lions are favored by 11. The total is 52 and a half. This is going to be a 7:30 p.m. Eastern kick on New Year's Eve. So a solo game for them. Penn State obviously got a huge win over SMU. Boise State obviously has been, waiting in the wings after a great year, led by Ashton Gency and that team. I think this is an interesting matchup. Watching a team that mostly relies on the run, playing against Penn State and their defense, and Penn State offensively is doing a lot of things well that I don't think Boise State, or I question if Boise State's going to be able to stop. But it's a different matchup than SMU in a lot of ways because SMU, their quarterback just like imploded in that game. And I think it was interesting because they relied so much on him to, um, in their season. And, he comes to this moment and you know, Penn State tough environment, you wet the bed a little bit. This being a neutral site game um, is interesting, but also it's a little different because you still dealing with a team that's relying on one great player, and that's Genty, but it's the running back and not the quarterback, which I think adds a different dynamic. And we saw, for those who might say, "Oh, Boise State's played like meager competition," um, Boise State, I mean, excuse me, yeah, Boise State as a team, but Ashton Genty ran all over Oregon at Austin Stadium earlier this year. So I think it'll translate when we talk about this game this game against Penn State.
Yeah, for sure. And granted, that Oregon team was not the team we've seen the past couple weeks. Uh, they had a lot of struggles, and I think people have kind of forgotten about it. And credit to them for getting better. But Boise kind of caught Oregon at a really tough time, so I know that's part of it. But notwithstanding, Genty had an incredible game in a tough environment, and you got to give him credit from that. The guy is a dog, and to me, I know there are times whenever you have these really great running backs for smaller teams playing weaker competition. We kind of saw this with Ollie Gordon last year at Oklahoma State. Anytime he would run up against a kind of stacked defensive line, he would wither a little bit. Genty's not that type of guy. He is much more physical. He looks the part, in my opinion, of a guy who can handle, a load against a bigger, tougher defense like Penn State has. And I feel like Boise State can play with these guys. I really do. And you talk about this being a neutral site, and let me tell you, I know from experience there are two places you don't want to see Boise: one on the blue, and two in the damn Fiesta Bowl. So, as an Oklahoma fan, obviously can attest to that. But they've been to the Fiesta Bowl several other times, won every single one of them. This is just a place where that stadium is a place where they just thrive. So, I feel like maybe that's just BS or whatever, but they just sometimes in college football kind of could be weird like that. You don't want to see Boise in the Fiesta Bowl. And to me, that point about Kevin Jennings, you said, SMU outplayed Penn State like through stretches of that game outside of the catastrophes. Because I mean, man, those were catastrophes. You saw that SMU had moments where they were in the red zone, they're driving, and either Jennings would throw a pick six or make the wrong move, or it was just a disaster. But there's a world where a more experienced, more seasoned, composed quarterback can take a massive advantage for SMU, and that game looks entirely different. Genty isn't a guy who makes mistakes. He holds on to the ball really well. And to me, I feel like that style of play translates in a way that I think can allow Boise to play to hang in this game pretty big time.
Yeah, and I think that's all those dynamics is what, like, to me, is what makes the line of 11 points a little bit deceiving. And I think, like, my thoughts are maybe Vegas truly believes that Penn State is that good, or maybe they are taking advantage of perhaps like the ignorance of the casual fan of like Boise State being that they're from, not a Power Four conference, um, or people's like confidence in like the supremacy of the Big Ten or Penn State over a team like Boise State. Penn State's been, pretty good this year. Obviously, losses came to teams that we already knew were better than them in Oregon and Ohio State, but it's hard to measure like where Boise State matches up to Penn State, and I think the line has something to do with that. But I think realistically the game is going to be a lot closer than what Vegas thinks.
Yeah,
And
I feel like
you mentioned.
and I feel like Vegas has been overvaluing Penn State a lot this season. I don't know if I don't have the numbers in front of me to back that up on, their record against the spread, but I feel like you look at it and, Penn State has been a little bit overinflated this season. Um, and I don't know. I think this is going to shake out a little differently. I know I was pretty big on all of the dogs last week. It was a horrible weekend for the dogs, so I probably put my hand back on the hot stove here after getting burnt. But I don't know. I just think the style of play for Boise is a lot different. I think the venue shift is a lot different. Not being in Happy Valley. And I think flat out Boise State's a better team than SMU is, or at least in that moment. I mean, environment wise, you look at where Penn State SMU had played. Their biggest venue up until that point was Louisville, which is not remotely close. I believe Beaver Stadium was double that. So, yeah, it was a weird situation. But I think Boise, a team that has played in tough environments, that always has a chip on their shoulder. I have seen this too many times and have lived it out to not doubt Boise State in big moments in a Fiesta Bowl. I'm not putting my hand on that burner for sure. They just that program just finds a way to win big in big moments.
Yeah. So Penn State's record against the spread is 8-5. So I mean, good but not great. You know what I'm saying? Like, so interestingly enough, I think the only indoor game they played was the Big Ten Championship. So Penn State, neither Penn State or BSU for that matter has played indoor all year. I mean, sorry, Penn State and BSU have only played indoor once all year between the two of them, and that was the Big Ten Championship for Penn State. So it's interesting. That's an interesting dynamic too, like them both being indoor. It's been very unusual for these two teams, but yeah, I think I'm going to take Penn State here. Um, Not a surprise. Does BSU cover that, 11, 10 and a half, whatever you want to set your bet at? Like, sure, I think it's possible. I think Boise State has the ability to make it a close game against Penn State and rough it up a little bit. That total of 50, what was it, 52 and a half? Like a little high for me. I might even like take the under as well. But yeah, I mean, Penn State, I think all things considered is, and as much as we've been propping up what Boise State can do in this game, I think overall they're the better team. And I think Drew Aller, when it comes down to it, yeah, he might give you a couple of interceptions or whatever, or turn the ball over. But I think he's also capable of making the plays that they're going to need to make in order to win this one.
Yeah, I think I'm sorry. Let's see. I don't know if, okay, I'm still live. That's good. Okay. Computer froze up there on me a little bit there. Yeah, I think I'm with you on Penn State winning the ball game, even though I just said I'm not going to count out Boise. I think Boise covers. I just think, to me, if you have to force Boise's quarterback to win the game for you, do I think they can do that? And I'm not quite sure. I think Genty obviously can do a lot, but I don't think you can win a college football playoff game by being that one-dimensional on offense. And, I think Madsen's not a bad quarterback, but I don't know if he, in that moment, when it comes down to, winning time, if he can make the plays to do that. And that's why I'm going to go with Penn State to win. I think this is going to be a banger of a game. And I could definitely see a world where Boise wins this. I think it's more likely than Vegas thinks. And I think best bet here might be money line on Boise, just for the hell of it. That's, that's not exactly, with the odds and everything, that feels like a fun bet and one I think they could hit. But ultimately, I think Penn State's defense is too good. They're too dynamic. Aller's great. Singleton's great. They just have that. They can get you in more ways than Boise can, and because of that, I'm going to go with Penn State to win the ball game. Boise to cover.
Yeah, and the odds for the Penn State, or excuse me, the odds for Boise State money line is plus 340. So pretty good odds there. And yeah, but yeah, totally. I think obviously you and I are in agreement on Penn State. Okay, that's the Fiesta Bowl. Should be an exciting game for sure. Or hopefully it's an exciting game. I'm excited to watch it, but hopefully it's actually a good game. Next, we're going to talk about the first New Year's Day game, and that's going to be the Peach Bowl, which will feature Texas and Arizona State. Texas fans very disappointed that Bevo will not be able to fit inside Mercedes-Benz Stadium, which is kind of like insane that they don't have enough room, but also like such a crazy thing to like be upset about. That you're like like your 2,000 pound bull can't doesn't have space to roam on the sidelines during your football game like in Atlanta. Like it's just insane. I think maybe you should just keep him in Austin and that'll be that. But yeah, big storyline in that game. But now Arizona State, fun team. Dillingham doing his thing. What a turnaround for them. He's won coach of the year and all that stuff. Sort of feels like Texas they had a really good game against Clemson, but it sort of feels like Texas is the team that everyone in the media seems to be really like questioning the most. And we can talk about if that's fair or unfair. But they'll get an Arizona State team that'll be frisky in this neutral site environment that's had some time to rest. I don't know what to expect. Vegas has this line at 13 and a half. Total is 51 and a half. How does Arizona State like get keep this ball game close or even possibly win it?
Yeah, to me it's on Cam Scatabo, who has been an excellent running back for them all season long. A real workhorse for sure. If they can run the ball, which is a big if. Texas is 9th in the country in rush defense. Like that is a tough team to run on. Ask Texas A&M, ask Clemson. They don't let up easy yards. So having your kind of star being a runner, that's really difficult, especially a physical one. If they can find a way to run the ball and not kind of force all of this on Leavitt, who I think is an excellent quarterback, chew up some of that clock, keep the ball out of Texas's offense's hands, and then of course continue to provide red zone woes for the Longhorns. A team that hasn't been producing a ton of explosives, hasn't been very effective in their own 25. They last time out against Georgia, well, in this stadium, you saw it. They were doing a lot of things right, but just couldn't score touchdowns. And that'll get you beat in close games. I think Arizona State can do enough to keep this close. I just think that the style of play they operate works really well for Big 12 teams that aren't as big, and you can kind of grind them down. I don't think you can grind Texas down. And I think that's the biggest thing to me. If you can somehow find a way to do that, more power to you. But this is a physical, tough defense that, in my opinion, is the star of this. That is the shining star of that Texas offense or the Texas team as a whole. Quinn Ewers, shockingly, might be one of the weaker points of the offense. And yeah, I don't know. I just don't. I think Arizona State's going to have to bring a lunch pail physical mentality to this ball game if they want to win, because Texas in the trenches is really big, and you kind of got to hit them in the mouth. So that's my thought process on it. Long, grinded out drives, keep Texas's offense on the bench.
Yeah, I think those are all good points. I think what I have a hard time with um, is that Texas is so hard to judge because they've won these games, and in some of the games, they haven't always looked good. We've seen Quinn Ewers make mistakes, but they haven't had that game where like they've just made enough to necessarily lose. Now, in the second Georgia game, it was competitive, and then there were things that like I feel like they left points on the board. Um, but that's against Georgia, who can make you pay, right? Um, with Texas, I think you do make a good point about like let's run the ball, let's eat up clock, let's limit the possessions for the Longhorns. But then it just comes down to Texas, like, are they going to play a clean football game or are they going to like, shoot themselves in the foot, turn the ball over? Because if they do that with the possessions that they have, and you can limit the possessions that they have, then you got a shot. But even with limited possessions, if Texas comes out and plays a clean game, then like it might not matter. And then Texas, to their credit, has played really good defense. Um, the Clemson score was 38-24. I think some of those points for Clemson came in garbage time. I think that Clemson started out really well, but then Texas kind of put the kibosh on it, and then you know Clemson backdoored them a little bit. But for the most part, like Texas has played well defensively, so that kind of gives me cause to pause about like what Arizona is going to be able to do, and if Arizona is going to be able to control the time of possession because um, Texas is just too good on defense. Um, and then again, unless they really muck it up on offense, like it's going to be very difficult for Arizona State to take advantage, um, or to stop them for that matter. If Texas is humming, so that's the hard part about this game for me. And we know.
Yeah,
Oh, sorry. And I'll sorry, I
and
just and I'll add real quick at the end here, like Arizona State, like not to belabor the point, but competition to me, there's no one they've played that's close to Texas level. Um, this year they have played some good teams. Iowa State, BYU, um, you know, Utah earlier this year, no walk in the park. Um, but I think Texas is that another tier. They're one of the top teams in the country, and I don't know if Arizona State has the team necessarily to deal with what Texas can throw at you. So that's kind of where I struggle with the Sun Devils.
I think that is fair. You know, especially talking about how, and I don't mean to just keep going with Scatabo here, but I think that's a clear differential. When you're going up against a tougher defense, that just changes everything for you. I I don't know. I mean, I'll also say I don't know if Texas has run into a running back on the caliber of Scatabo, which is crazy looking at, you know, oh, it's an SEC schedule, but who's the best running back they faced? Etienne from
Yeah,
Georgia,
he's been banged up.
I guess, and even he hasn't been great.
Yeah.
I don't remember the Texas A&M running back off the top of my head. It was it apparently didn't matter because Marcel Reed led that game in rushing yards. So they haven't had to face off against a bell cow back all season long. So I think that is an interesting factor. Maybe because they've been shutting them down. I don't really know. And I will say, Texas, one of the things they've been doing really, really well, and kind of flip things around is a big question mark was their running game. And Jaden Blue and Quatravian Wisner, especially Wisner, have been remarkable. If they can run the ball in Arizona State, which has a pretty salty rush defense, they're 22nd in the country. I think that's huge for the Longhorns because that's kind of what flipped that game with Clemson is they got away from the run game, started airing it out with Quinn, wasn't very effective. Clemson gets back in. What do? Immediately pound the rock. Immediately, a home run rush from I can't remember if it was Wisner or Blue, but game over at that point. So if the Horns can, run the ball like really, really well, create somewhat of a balance, but kind of be run heavy, I don't know. I like Texas to win this game. I don't know if I trust them to cover just with how they let teams hang around, with just how Arizona State is, with how Dillingham can, drop a hell of a game plan. I think the Sun Devils hang around enough to cover. I think Texas is just too dynamic of a team, too physical on both sides of the ball in the trenches. And, I think this is a really good matchup, but I think we're going to leave this one with continued questions about the Longhorns.
Yeah, I don't know if I trust Texas to cover either. Like, Arizona State plus 13.5 might be a good play, for sure. On this, because I think Arizona State, neutral site game, Texas is a little banged up. They've had injuries on the offensive line, which kind of makes what their running backs are doing even more impressive, by the way, because they've had those injuries. But injuries on the offensive line, Arizona State can run the ball. We know, Texas, like we said in the beginning, can make mistakes and shoot themselves in the foot. So with all those factors in it, I think I can talk myself in this game being closer. Um, Going to the records against the spread and all that jazz that we'll have to discuss on the show. 5-8 for Texas against the spread. Arizona State's 8-5. Um, but the public loves Texas to cover. 81% of bets on Texas to cover the 13.5. So I think I'm with you. I think I like Arizona State plus 13.5. But yeah, Texas probably just has another gear that I don't know if Arizona State can match up with at the end of the day. Okay, moving on to the Rose Bowl. Ohio State versus Oregon, a rematch of a game we saw a few weeks ago in Autzen Stadium. Ohio State, the line opened at 1. It's now gone to 2.5. So still close game, but Ohio State's favorite has become a little bit larger. Um, the total is 55.5. And of course, this is a New Year's Day kickoff at 5 p.m. Eastern um, in Pasadena. So, um, I mean, what are your expectations for part two? Because the first game was close. I remember there being a lot of penalties, a lot of back and forth, and ultimately, you know, Ohio State just got messed up by a goofy quarterback error at the end of the game. Um, this time around, circumstances are different. Both teams familiar with the Rose Bowl environment. Um, I think Ohio State had something to prove last week against Tennessee, and they definitely came out and proved it. It doesn't seem like they're thinking about Michigan anymore. It seems like they have moved on. And credit to Ryan Day for getting his team to start fast. I think if Ohio State were to win this game, it'd be huge for Day and his job. But I think if they lose, I think he still has a job either way. Whether he deserves it or not, we can debate that. But I do think um, I do expect um, I do expect Ryan Day to keep his job no matter what the result of this game is. Um, I think we're at that point. Good showing against Tennessee. You didn't lose in the first round. You come back next year and figure out how to beat Michigan. You give them another year, save some money on the buyout and all the mess you have to do with transfer portal if you let them go. So, um, yeah. With that being said, what do you expect from the rematch of Oregon and Ohio State?
Yeah, it's hard to say. What Ohio State team are we going to see?
Yeah,
If it's the one that we we saw, at Ohio Stadium against Tennessee the other night, I don't know if there's a team in the country that can beat that version of Ohio State. That is the actualized, realized version of what Ohio State could and should have been all season long. Just firing on all cylinders. Excellent, excellent performance from them. They let everyone throwing dirt on them, myself included. I thought they were toast. Just shut them up. And you got to give them credit. That was a resounding win in the face of just horrible vibes there. So many Tennessee fans taking over the shoe. I didn't see that one coming to that degree. And you got to give them credit for that. How they handle the next one, because you can't have two bounce backs. Like if you could continue that momentum, continue that severity, then I think Ohio State is the team to beat in college football. But that being said, Oregon is, in my opinion, one of the most complete teams in the sport. I think they play defense great. I think their offense is just humming. It's dynamic. It's multifaceted. Dylan Gabriel, obviously a very seasoned veteran at quarterback, but you got Jordan James, hell of a running back. Tez Walker is just a hell of a receiver as well. And you're rested. You're not coming off of a prior game, so I think this one's going to be just as good as the first one. It's hard to beat the same team twice. I totally get that, but I think when the game is that evenly matched, it's not, oh, we have all of this tape on what we did wrong. Let's fix it. Both teams can tidy things up. And both teams played such a good game the first time out that it's one of those. I don't know how much it swings, and I just think it's going to be a hell of a football game. I'm so excited to watch this one. It's a great matchup, and I will say I agree. I think Day's safe. Everything you've heard about, the administration still backs him, all of that, and I think his seat is at a proper temperature. We'll see if they get blown out against Oregon, then maybe it's a question. I don't think that's going to happen. I think both of these teams. I'll say this: I think if there is a blowout, it'll be Ohio State administering it, just because of how damn good they looked the other night. That was as scary a football team as I've seen in quite some time.
they looked great. The hard part for me about comparing that situation to this one was, I think, so many times Tennessee just looked so shell shocked. They got a young quarterback. You're playing in the shoe in that environment. This team is angry coming off of the loss to Michigan. I think all those things factor in um, to what that game looks like. But my gut feeling, Bobby. I don't think any of that translates to this game. You still might have some feelings about Michigan, but you take your foot off the gas a little bit because you just got a win and you're in the situation. The leverage really is with Oregon because Ohio State lost the first game. So now it's like you have to find the motivation to beat this team that's already beat you. So Oregon's coming in with a mentality of we've done it already, as opposed to Ohio State. And you mentioned all these things before, but I think it all matters, right? Like Dylan Gabriel being a veteran quarterback, um, the weapons that Oregon has, the offensive line, everything. It's like that matters so much compared to a situation where, you know, um, you're trotting out an inexperienced quarterback and a team that isn't as doesn't really have those skill players to match up with what the players that Ohio State traditionally has, especially at the skill position. So I think it's a little different. I think, to be honest, I think this game has got a few differences from the past game, and I also think I like Dan Lanning a little bit better in a critical spot here, um, just based on the way this has unfolded. It feels like it feels like Dan Lanning has a control and a mental like edge to be able to get this team to focus in, play hard, be physical, and win ball games. And Oregon's undefeated for a reason. They had a not the toughest schedule in the world, but pretty good schedule, pretty decent teams on it, and pretty much ran through everybody. So for me, I think in this game, um, I think I like Oregon. Um, for all those reasons, and I'll even add that um, for me, like seeing Ohio State 2.5, and I know how Ohio State fans travel, but I mean, the Rose Bowl is damn near a home game for Oregon fans. Like, man, Dan Lanning, I think, got to have this team ready to go out and feel disrespected by the line, feel the confidence and like you've already beaten Ohio State, and go out and do it again. Like, veteran quarterback, ball out, keep the ball out of harm's way, and the Ducks will be fine.
Yeah, and I feel like there's a lot to be said about emotion, and obviously the lows of Michigan swinging up and correcting that. There's also a hangover aspect, and you can tell Ohio State really relished that victory, and I get that you should, but I would rather have no emotional like high, low, whatever. The Ducks have just been chilling out at home, locked in. Who knows what sort of bizarre torture Dan Lanning has been doing to these guys to make them focus in on winning the game. And I don't know. I don't know where Ohio State is focus wise. I know exactly where Oregon is, and I think that's sort of a factor as well. I think the environments can be great. I feel like a true 50-50, even though Oregon's way closer. Ohio State, they roll out everywhere, given, that fan base and that alumni base. So I think it's going to be just a beautiful, incredible setting at the Rose Bowl. And I think we're in for a game of the year. I like the Ducks as well. I feel like they're a little bit more complete. I think they have, I agree with you. I think their head coach is better. And like I said in October, I'm going to go with the team with the more experienced quarterback that I trust more. That's Dillon Gabriel, and worked out pretty good last time.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah. Again, like I said in the beginning, at the end of the day, it was Ohio State's quarterback that at the end of it just like made the one mistake that you couldn't make. And yeah, interestingly enough, neither one of these teams are great against the spread. Ohio State 5-7, Oregon 5-8. But everywhere else, I mean, pretty much as evenly matched as you can be. Ohio State defends a lot better, but in a lot of ways, these I really wish that like, and again, we talked about it in the beginning. Like, I think the reseeding and formatting the bracket is going to improve over the years when it comes to the playoff. But like, it really disappoints me that this is a quarterfinal matchup. Like, if this was a semifinal or even the championship, like I'd be I'm excited for this, but I'd be more excited if that's what we're getting. And it sucks that like this has to be a game so early in the bracket.
I think it's redeemed by the fact it's going to be at the Rose Bowl. Like if you put this in like some boring cookie cutter NFL stadium, like if this was in Indianapolis or Atlanta or just anywhere, just name your NFL stadium, it would suck. But because it's the Rose Bowl,
Yeah.
because it's New Year's Eve, or sorry, New Year's Day, like it's going to be a perfect scene. I agree with you. This is a game that I think could be like these could be the best two teams in the country. I legitimately think that and yeah, you probably don't want to watch the national championship, in round 2, but I kind of think we might be. I kind of think these are. I think whoever wins this, uh, I will fully pick them to win the title after this. I
Yeah.
really do believe that. I like both of these teams a lot. Um, specifically, I like the Ohio State we saw last week. If that translates, we'll see. But
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. I like
It's
them
almost
both.
like those years we had when like the Warriors and the Lakers were playing in the like play in, and it was like, dang, this feels like the finals. Like like LeBron and Steph, like why is this happening before the playoffs even really start? But nah, this is cool. This is what it's all about.
Yep.
Excited for that one. Looks like yeah, we're both taking Oregon. We're agreeing in that for sure. All right. Last game. It's not the Rose Bowl. I mistyped this. This is the Sugar Bowl. Thanks, Bobby, for that. Um, Notre Dame and Georgia. Georgia favored by 2. Um, couple of total is 43 and a half. 8:45 Eastern kick, New Year's Day. Um, couple of injury things to think about for this game. Um, Notre Dame lost a very key defensive lineman. Um, so that's gonna be a blow for them, especially against a Georgia, you know, SEC any SEC offensive line, but Georgia especially. Like, you want your guys in the trenches to be available, your best guys in the trenches to be available. Notre Dame has some depth, but that loss definitely is going to hurt them for sure. And then, of course, Georgia will be without Carson Beck. They'll be starting their backup in this game. So, interesting dynamic. Both teams losing some key players. Um, but yeah, another game where you can kind of see it being, or you kind of wish that it's a little bit later in the bracket. But we'll take it now. Notre Dame has been on a tear. They handle Indiana. Um, they're playing well on both sides of the ball. Riley Leonard, looks to be in control. And Georgia, of course, um, just taking care of business in a lot of ways this year, um, and finding themselves when it really matters, just kind of like being able to finish games, especially as of late. Overtime wins over Georgia Tech and Texas is what got them in this position. Um, and Georgia's still, you know, hanging on to, a semblance of a dynasty, I guess you will be able to say if they win it all. But first they're gonna have to beat a Notre Dame team who has been hot. Um, this is probably one of the teams to pick a winner, neutral site, again, it'll be interesting. Probably going to be, I would imagine, for the most part, Georgia fans, but Notre Dame fans travel too. Again, two very physical teams. Speaking of injury news, it looks like the Georgia running back that we talked about earlier, ETN, will be healthy in this game. For the first time really all year. Um, so that'll play a part. But yeah, all I have to say is I think this is definitely the hardest game to pick in my head. I don't know who to pick. I don't know how much of Georgia's backup situation is going to affect them. I know how great Notre Dame's been playing, but like not to poo poo too much on it. Like Indiana's a good team, but you know, and Notre Dame really hasn't played um, a great team at all this year. They've played a lot of good teams. They played A&M, who they beat. They played Louisville, who they beat. of course, Georgia Tech, um, and Indiana, right? Like, but nobody really great. And Georgia, we know, is very much so battle tested. Um, so I don't even know like what I mean. What do you think about all this, Bobby? This is I'm racking my brain over this,
Yeah,
honestly.
as you should be. This is a really tough call for me. I was really impressed by Notre Dame last time out. They stomped, they flat out stomped Indiana. They out physical them. They made the big plays when they needed to, um, and you know, I was impressed with them because I was relatively big on the Hoosiers, so that was to see a domination like that. I didn't see that coming. Georgia's obviously a different story in general. I think to me, it's so hard to figure out how much of the Gunner Stockton performance from that second half of the Texas game, how much of that is, oh my God, this guy came in. We don't know how to stop him. We have no tape on him, and how much of it is he's actually good. And I'm willing to say that I honestly think that a lot of that was a bit of surprise. And I don't know. He's just to me a total unknown, and I do not like the fact that your quarterback is an unknown in this situation. I like the way he kind of handled himself down the line. Obviously, a bad interception late against Texas, but overall, I thought he was a spark that changed that game. Um, but for me, I think when it comes down to it, Notre Dame has so rarely been tested physically, and they certainly weren't tested physically with Indiana, who is, God bless them. They had a really good performance this season, but they're glued together with a bunch of James Madison transfers and like Mac guys, which you did a lot with it. It's Tony Stark building a suit in a cave with a box of scraps, which is impressive, but it's, you can only go so far. Um, Georgia isn't that. Georgia's physical. Georgia's big, and I think to me the Dogs, I'm trending towards them because I think they just have too much. They have too much grit. I think they're too big, and I think Notre Dame's going to have some issues with Georgia that they don't have against other teams because they out talent them, and they're running into a team that has the talent to stand up to them and beat them. Jeremiah Love, who I think is a great running back, I think he's solid. He's probably not going to bust out for those massive runs like he did against Indiana, against that Georgia defensive front. A defensive front that has done great at limiting running backs. Quintravian Wisener, we talked about earlier this show, didn't have a great game in the championship. Even Ole Miss didn't really do much in their stomping. So I think you can make Notre Dame a little one-dimensional, make Riley Leonard beat you. So I'm trending Georgia, but man, I don't feel good about it.
Yeah. Um, yeah, this really all comes down to quarterback play, and I'm not really sure, even in this moment. Riley Leonard's been balling, he's been hooping, so to speak, but again, like the trust factor against a team like Georgia is so hard to say. Um, and I mean, Notre Dame like runs the ball really well as well. They do a lot of things good that I think Georgia can too. I said this, I think in last week's show, but you know, in terms of the experience factor, like there might be some guys on the team at Notre Dame that like were on the Ian Book Notre Dame teams, but like this iteration of the Fighting Irish really hasn't been to the playoff or had that much experience. Um, unless like I said, unless somebody's on the team from those days. Georgia's experience is going to matter. Um, but with them starting a backup, and even if it was Beck, like Beck has had a rough year. Like, Beck hasn't been perfect either. Um, so man, I'd feel better if Notre Dame wasn't missing, their star defensive lineman because I'm like, okay, cool. Like I know they can get pressure and make Gunner make some mistakes, and perhaps they still can. They have a lot of depth on that line, but this is just so hard. I'm just going to go with Notre Dame, thinking they get pressure on their quarterback, um, on the quarterback there for the Bulldogs. I mean, yeah. Sorry, thinking they're going to be a bit of pressure on the quarterback. Riley Leonard in that offense looks hot. I don't think they're one dimensional. I think they're going to be. I think they can be made one dimensional. Not to dispute what you said. I think I agree with that. But I think the way they put up points, I think they figured something out. And both sides of the ball, I think they have it. And Georgia, like I said, in a lot of ways has lucked out with turnovers going their way, you know, battling out in overtime, things going their way, teams beating themselves. And I think if this is a close game, I feel like there could be a scenario where Georgia's luck just runs out. Like you can't be lucky forever. And maybe they are, and maybe I'm wrong, and maybe they are, and they're right all the way to the championship. But I like Notre Dame. Just trust them a little bit more balance wise. I know Georgia has more of the experience, more of the luck on their side, but um, who knows? Maybe the Fighting Irish will find some luck in this game and get on to the next round. So
Yeah,
um, no
not
puns,
great.
no puns intended there.
Not great when you're like relying on luck and you're playing a team, literally called the Irish with a leprechaun and the Shamrock. Like that's like just asking for trouble. But I think really, I think it's a win, not if situation for when Georgia like kind of gets derailed. I'm just not sure it happens here. But I agree with you. I think once you lose Beck, who give or take whatever your opinion on him is, I think he still gives him the best chance to win. Of course, it's just the wheels are going to fall off at some point, and I'm not sure if it'll be Notre Dame. It very well might be.
It could be. All right. Well, that's our show. We broke down the games. Should be a really, really fun weekend. Sorry, day of or 2 days of football coming up next week, New Year's Eve and New Year's Day, quarterfinal of the CFP. Before we go, lock of the week. I didn't think I would be able to do it, but I'm inching in on coming close to Bobby. So it'll be down to the wire literally as we have three more weeks to crown a lock of the week champion. The scoreboard right now is Bobby at 18 points, me at 14. So I'm getting there and was assisted by Bobby's incorrect pick last week of Tennessee plus 7.5. Devastatingly not close game for the Volunteers. Even though I was nervous because there was like more of their fans in the crowd, so I was like, oh shoot, like Tennessee might do something, but Ohio State opened up a can on them, and that's the way that went. And then I had that game going over 46.5. Again, I was sweating that a little bit because Tennessee couldn't really seem to score anything, but in the end, OSU put up the 42, and Tennessee, put some points on the board to help me get over that 46.5. So that got me a little bit closer to Bobby. And now this week, I struggled with what I was going to lock. Thought about a lot of things. I didn't like any of the spreads, so I left them alone completely. I'll tell you what my gut pick was, or what my first instinct was, and then I went away from it just to be safe. But I was thinking hard about over for Notre Dame and Georgia. 43.5 slow. Both of those teams score. Both of those teams can score, but Georgia dealing with a backup quarterback. Both teams have good defenses. Notre Dame barely went over that last week against Indiana. So I'm just imagining different competition, that score could be a little lower than 43 and a half. So wasn't really willing to take the over or under there. So I'm keeping it simple and picking Texas. I think out of all the sure money line bets, Texas is probably the one that I'm most sure about. Mostly just because I think as flawed as Texas is, they're just flat out better than Arizona State. Arizona State has not played any level of competition close to Texas, and I think while Arizona State might be able to cover, I think Texas. To me, I trust them most to flat out win. So just keeping it simple, trying to get closer to my man Bobby here. So gotta keep it simple, especially in crunch time as we get to the last couple of weeks. So that's my lock. I'm taking Texas to take the dub.
Yeah, I've been messing around here a little too much, and I wouldn't say I'm not locked in because I, wa- I was big on Tennessee. Maybe I shouldn't have messed around and a couple weeks ago said Missouri isn't going to score more than a touchdown. Like that might have been a little silly, might be hurting it, but we have time to lock in and get the car back on the road, so to say. And I'm with you. I've been flip flopping on two picks to me, and I actually like. I'm trying to figure out which game which dog I think will keep it closer. I'm trending Arizona State one, just because it's a little bit more points, and two, I feel like the way they play football can really like slow down a game, muck up a game, and Texas just doesn't separate themselves, and I kind of think that'll keep happening here. So give me the Sun Devils to cover 13 and a half. I think that's where I settled on the document. So Cam Scatterbo, don't let me down, man. Let's get this done. Let's get this set.
All right, let's do it. Those are our locks. We'll be back not next week, not next Wednesday, but probably the following week to discuss, of course, the New Year's Six bowl games and everything to do with the summer fun around. So you'll get a little bit of a break, but of course, always glad to chat with you. It's been fun talking football once again. Can't wait for these games, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching. Peace.
All right. Good
All right.
work, man.
Thanks, man. Take care.
We'll do. You too. Talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon.